All right, welcome to Gambling Chronicles Volume 3. I'm going to jump right into it here. We got this podcast up on Spotify now. The most logical step seems to be to get this thing over to YouTube, just for a more friendly listener experience. And I'll continue to just rip these onto Twitter as well. So, yeah, that's kind of where that is right now. Maybe eventually I'm going to grab some fancy equipment, make the sound a little bit better. But for now, this is just how it's going to be. So today on the docket, probably go over a little bit of what I did today, what I plan doing in the off season. I'm going to recap some of those Natty props that I put out the other day. Maybe a little recap of my season. What I plan on doing for Super Bowl props and Super Bowl prep for Super Bowl props. What it's like having a massive amount of money on one game and how that feels. Maybe touch a little bit on Rufus made a pretty good post on, betting and bankroll, etc. I suggest if you're not following Rufus Peabody, follow Rufus on Twitter, and it's kind of good. A lot of the stuff that he talks about, it makes me think a little bit more, and it's helped sharpen me up in certain areas where maybe I was a little dull over the years. So definitely give that a read. It's very interesting. I'm not going to go too deep into that, but probably touch a little bit on it later on. So yeah, we got this thing, got it onto Spotify. YouTube's next. I'll probably get that, I don't know, I'm hoping to get it done in the next week. I get a lot of DMs or suggestions from people just saying, hey, you got to get this on Spotify, you got to get this on YouTube. And I totally get that, but like the time crunch for me is, I just don't have all the time in the world. 6 o'clock in the morning, some days I'm getting, a Hogan leg drop from my 5-year-old, and then before you know it, I'm getting him from school, going to sports multiple days a week. There's just not a lot of time. But I plan on getting that up there as soon as I can. So today, woke up, got him off to school, had a pretty clear docket. So, see this nice bald head here? I hit the barber shop, and a lot of people probably wondering, hey, this guy's bald. Why does he go to the barber shop? Well, I go in there because, I take my son in there, and I used to take my older son to the same barber shop. I know the guys in there. It's a good social experience, but at the same time, you can get some networking done in the barber shop. Great place to network. So if you're not networking at your barber shop, what are you even doing? I'll probably touch on that in a future podcast. I plan on doing a really deep dive into my experiences in networking and different ways to network, and all kinds of stuff that pertains to that. I've got many topics lined up. I've done a lot of writing in the last year, and I feel like I can turn a lot of that into podcast topics, and I'm probably going to have some guests on it at some point. But one question keeps coming up. Hey man, like, what are you going to do now that like the football season's over? And like, you're going to do NBA props, or you're going to do MLB props, you're going to do this, you're going to do that. And it's a good question, but I don't know. I don't have the time to learn that stuff. I probably could jump into it, but I don't want to learn that stuff. I would rather, I've formed a lot of connections. Like yesterday, I reached out to a guy who I feel is a world-class NBA handicapper in the props, and I have another group that I work with for NBA props. So like, I'd rather just let these guys that are already so deep into this do the work, and then whatever connections I have, maybe there's people that want to bet them, and then basically it's just running by itself, which will give me the next 6 months more or less off, or just need to manage this stuff. That's all. Manage, low stress, less work, and yeah, maybe I'll make a little bit less than if I originated this stuff and learned how to do it. But that's a big learning curve. That's if I could even do it, and if I did do it, I probably would go for the origination side and not the top down side, just because I feel like if I became a top down better, I just don't know. The obsessive compulsive, I probably never leave my computer, and it would just lead to a totally shitty, stressed out life. That's for me. I'd rather just come and go as I please, cap what I like, and then just do whatever. But I'm going to jump in here to these natty props. I think I gave out 19 props. I went 9 and 10. And I did tell you when I released that video the other day, this was by far the worst card out of all these games that I've seen. Part of it was the matchup, the total on the game, the uncertainty of how Notre Dame, what their numbers were going to look like at the end of the day. It could have went like to one extreme or the other extreme, and it kind of went the way that we thought. And we lost a couple of these on the final drive, which is typical, not making any excuses. That does happen a lot when you're betting props, especially unders. If you have unders on a team trailing, the last drive or overtime, it can really fuck you from time to time. So I'm going to go through each one of these really quick and just give my thoughts on, how it played out. Would I play it again? Maybe, if I could take a mulligan on one of these, maybe I would. But I think for the most part, I think I would play them all again for the most part, same way. Nothing's really changed. I wouldn't change my opinion too much on most of these, except for maybe a couple. Like, first one was Howard under 29.5 attempts. We felt like unless Ohio State was like trailing for a good portion of this game, that wasn't going to come close, and it didn't come close. So we hit that one. Face on, his receiving yards and receptions went pretty much according to script. He was a ghost. Those were pretty good, but again, those got nuked midweek, and we didn't get a ton down on those. By the time the game tipped off, those numbers were kind of gone, which kind of gets to part of Rufus's post on the, how these markets, a lot of the stuff that we did get a lot down on, we lost on. The stuff that was available, on game day. So that's something we've been kind of trying to work on a lot, so we don't get caught with our pants down in a lot of these scenarios. Let's see here. Mitchell Evans, 15.5 under long. Again, last drive, his last catch, I think it was the last Notre Dame completion of the game, possibly. He goes over 15 and a half. Let's see here. Judkins, under 57 and a half rush, under 69 and a half rush receive. Lost that. Again, he had 3 carries at the half. He hit one big run in the second half. Yeah, he had 3 touchdowns on the game, but that one big run just crippled that entire bet right there. Not making excuses. That's how you lose these props sometimes. But feel like if this game was played 10 more times, we'd probably be on the under there. Pretty much. Split backfield. They've been throwing the ball a lot, and feel like that's not his ceiling, but, if he's getting 11 carries, 57 and a half yards is, about the top end of where he's going to land a lot of the time. We had Judkins under 14 and a half rush attempts. That hit easily. I think he finished with like 11. Henderson under 11 and a half rush attempts. Again, we lose that, but he gets 12 rush attempts. So I'd bet that again all day long. Anytime you're losing under props by thin margins like that, you're probably on the right side. I'd just rather be on the under than the over in a lot of those scenarios. Love under 11 and a half rush attempts. Again, that one hit easy. He had like 4 rushing attempts in that game. They fell behind, and they couldn't get him going. Leonard, this is another one. Leonard under 14 and a half rush attempts. First drive, they come out, they just run QB power the whole way down the field. I mean, yeah, that's just the way it goes. I think he had 9 carries for 50 yards on the first drive. And I had someone chirping at me on Twitter like, hey, he already went over, man. And it's like, yeah, I can see that he already went over, and we're definitely going to lose the rush attempts unless we're going to lose the rush attempts unless he gets hurt. But college football, if you have unders on quarterbacks, you're always in play until the end of the game, pretty much no matter what, especially if a team is coming from behind, which they were. At the end of this game, he finishes with 40 yards on 17 rush attempts. The total was between 35.5 and 37.5. So, again, I feel comfortable with that. Even if I know he's going to run the ball that much in a game like this, I also know more often than not they're going to be trailing, and more often than not he's going to be getting sacked. So, again, he gets 17 carries. He only winds up with 40 yards. If you're getting under 36.5 rushing yards, I feel like you're on the right side of this play. I mean, he beat us this time, but I would play the under again. And you can look back at every time Riley Leonard has lost a game in college football. Going into this game, I think just when his teams lose, he doesn't get to that number, and he's facing an elite defense in Ohio State. He's beat it a couple times, but you would have been winning at least 70% of the time in any of his losses. This year, which was one, went under, and when he was at Duke as well. So still feel pretty comfortable with that play. Let me see what else we got here. Oh, and another thing, like when they scored that first touchdown, like sometimes that's okay. I call it a grenade. Like sometimes you just gotta jump on the grenade. And if Notre Dame goes up 14-0, that pretty much blanks all the Notre Dame receivers that we faded. And then Judkins probably isn't going to come close to 60 on most nights. And all those carries for the Ohio State guys that we faded, those are going to go under. So sometimes losing something like that on the first drive, even if he ran for 100 yards, if they can get ahead, a couple of scores, sometimes that can work in your favor. I don't mind having one go for a grenade early. Sometimes that can play in your favor for the rest of the slate that you have going on. G. Scott over 14.5. Not good. He had a couple targets, I think. He finished with like 5 yards. But they have been getting him involved. They just didn't in this game. So that was a loss. Williams, that was the play that I gave out on Pizzola's stream, and I gave it out on Ed Feng's podcast. He finished with 0 receiving yards. He finished with 0 targets. I think he was in for 4 snaps in the game. That's the one, and I think I said it maybe on Ed's podcast. That was the one play we saw, and we probably should have went a little more crazy on that. We saw, and we just knew it was wrong. And we did have some sharp opposition. Pretty sharp prop capper released the over on that. And when we felt it got to a point, we just started hitting it. And it would get bet back up, and we would bet it back down. But with the way we thought about this game, I feel like, in talking with my partner yesterday, we probably should have went a little bit more bananas on that play, just because we felt that there was a good chance that what happened was going to happen. It was just the one play that really stuck out to us. And that's what kind of sucks about this game now. I mean, last year we nailed this game from top to bottom. The game script, exactly how it was going to play out. It took us projecting exactly how that game was going to play out. We had a great game, but the edges just aren't there anymore. I mean, I remember these Clemson, Alabama games, the LSU Clemson game, Burrow versus Lawrence. Like, there was just so much more listed, so many more backups listed. There was just the totals were so much higher. There was just so much more room for error. And with a 45-point total and a pretty dominant defense, there wasn't a lot of easy pickings in this game, in my opinion. I mean, maybe somebody else has a different opinion, but this wasn't a great game when it came to props, and I was upfront about that. Said I wouldn't be surprised if we did take an L on this. Obviously, Williams under 37.5 combined lost. Let me see here. I think that pretty much wraps up everything for that game. So all in all, it was pretty neutral for us. I mean, we lost, but it wasn't anything like substantial. Like I said, we went 9-10, and then I had a few other bets I sprinkled on, small money just for fun. Those didn't pan out, but it's not like it was a bloodbath, and that's one thing usually about these bigger games where you can get 20 positions. You get 20 positions, the chances of them all going down are 70% of them going down are it's not very good. The only time I can remember that happening was when I got a bad line on that. I had bad lines on that NFL weather game that got postponed last year in the playoffs. It was Bills, Steelers, hit all the unders, had pretty good positions, not the best positions, had great positions provided that game kicks off with the weather, but they postponed it. Got stuck with shitty numbers, let it ride, and we lost at least, I think, 80% of the plays. And obviously that's not ideal, but, you cap them for the weather. I mean, the chance of an NFL game getting postponed just isn't really good. But, again, if you establish a bunch of under positions in a game like this or a game like the Super Bowl, the chances of everything falling flat on your face, it's just not going to happen that often. Very, very rare. If you've done your homework and you feel like you have good positions. Another one we lost was let me see here. Carnell Tate, long, 18.5. He finished with 2 for 35. You think he had a 20-yard catch? I mean, you just lose there. That's fine. Anything else we got here? Yeah, Leonard under 34.5 long pass. That hit. Some people had 33.5. Obviously didn't hit. That landed at 34. I was lucky I had all the 34.5s there. And the one play that I might take a mulligan on, and I would take a mulligan on if I could, obviously, because it lost. But it was just one play we were debating all week was Mitchell Evans. Like, we know he's probably their best receiver from top to bottom. He's a tight end. 3.5, 33.5. Again, last drive, lost both of them. So, I mean, it could have went either way. I mean, the question is, if it won, would I be saying that right now? If he drops that pass and we win. So I don't know. I feel like that's just one of those plays where we could have filled that to infinity. In a couple spots, we did get that filled pretty large. And not the most ideal thing, but again, like when you're sending out orders on props, like it's hard to get an amount down that's really going to negatively affect you in a really negative way. I mean, you can get a lot and maybe take a beating on a couple here and there, but that's something I think we have to work on a little bit better this year. As far as one of the notes I have here that I mentioned earlier was recapping the season. It's plays like that. And, I was sending plays to a pretty big betting group for the first 8 weeks of this season, sending a mass amount of plays. And yeah, back to Rufus's post that, like stuff like this, it makes you think. And I was thinking this exactly like as it was happening. We were running bad. And the question is, like, were we running bad, or these plays just don't have the value anymore? We're getting really good fills on them, and eventually I just had to look at some of this stuff and eliminated some of them. I mean, you're able to get infinity on passing yards on whatever, let's just say North Carolina's quarterback, a half an hour before the game tips off. Like, you feel you have an edge, but feels like those are the plays in the prop market that are, most susceptible to have more variance and less edge nowadays, because the lines are just better, and you can get a lot more on some of this stuff closer to when the game kicks off, and there usually isn't a lot of market resistance on some of that stuff. So you just take it and you just get it all in, and then whatever. But I made an adjustment and things turned around. Had a really good season. I wouldn't say it was a great season, but it was a good season, good enough. Good enough to know that we're going to continue doing this in the future. But there are some adjustments I think we do have to make, and one of them is probably limiting the amount of plays that we're putting in. Back in the day, when I first started doing this, and I've gone over this before, I don't want to sound like a broken record, but if you blind bet every under in 2015, 16, 17, 18, 19, even 2020, just blind bet every under, NFL, college football. I've seen some stats out there. If you could have the ability to bet the whole board, you were hitting like 60, 62% or something like that. Now, do a little bit of work, do a little bit of research, and you might be able to get that up into the high 60s, maybe even 70% if you were really cherry picking. But I was just casting out a large volume of plays back then, and maybe for a few years you're hitting high 60s, 20%, maybe 20% ROIs, just ridiculous stuff. And you get used to doing something for so long, and still have never had a losing season or anything like that. But the last couple of years, I feel like I've hit a couple of stretches where I have to think and reconsider some of the plays that I'm making and making some adjustments in certain areas. And I have a pretty good read on what I do well and what isn't working well right now. And as long as you can think critically and, make adjustments on the fly, which is very hard to do in season, because you're just kind of in a tunnel. You're just doing your thing, but you just have to constantly think and make adjustments on the fly and hope it works out for the best. And I think we did a pretty good job of that this year. Also helps having my partner kind of as a spotter for me. I'll cap most of the stuff. He'll tell me what he disagrees with. And then, I basically give him the power to just say, no, we're not playing that. And I'm totally okay with that, unless it's something I'm completely sold on. And, even if he's not the one that's going to play, maybe I'll play some of that stuff on my own. But anyhow, enough rambling on there. Season went pretty good. So Super Bowl prep, sometimes I'll start getting into the Super Bowl prep, dabbling. I put in a few props last week. Did okay. I think I did okay for that Bills game. But I haven't touched really much in these playoffs except for some tackles and assists, which again, I'm not the one originating those. Somebody else originating those, and I can help facilitate getting some of that stuff down. But as far as straight player props go, usually I'll have a little tune-up. Maybe this week I'm not going to do anything this year. I'm going to take it off, watch the game, and just try and stay charged, because once these games end on Sunday, there's going to be props popping up left and right. And the limits are going to go up very quick at a lot of these books. And, there's going to be a lot of work that goes into that. So I'm just going to save myself for that and just try and go full steam ahead this week. And, just get in what I can on the stuff that I feel has the best value. And, I think now with the Super Bowl props, a lot of this stuff, like if you like it, you should bet it. I mean, it depends on where you're betting. And maybe, if the Chiefs make the Super Bowl, maybe some of that stuff will go up a little bit. But, I started doing these Super Bowl props in like 2017, and it feels like you're not getting that same value on Super Bowl Sunday as you normally would. Not even on Saturday. I feel like the value is peaking like, the middle of the actual Super Bowl week, maybe mid to late. And, some of that stuff you got to get in then. But there's other stuff that, you might think that you're going to get a better number on Sunday, but you're just not going to. Like some of the stuff I played last year, like Purdy's passing attempts or Purdy's completions. Like, I don't know, like I moved a lot of that stuff, and it didn't come back to favorable numbers ever again. There was really no resistance on it. So, some stuff you just got to go out there and you got to get it. And which leads me to another thing is, a lot of the Super Bowl prep. I have a file on my computer I just keep on there, and I do this around all big games. I probably should go in and update it for what we just experienced in this, the college football championship. But anytime there's these big games, you should just always take notes. But what you're seeing, how things moved, how much did you get here? How much did you get there? When did the limits increase? There's a lot of stuff like that. So I'll always take notes on that stuff because it's just easy. I could just ping in there and kind of see how it went last year or the year before or whatever. And have like a broad perspective on how I'm going to attack things this year. Which leads me to the next thing I wanted to talk about, which is the last 2 years in this game. I've had $1 million in props, like player props and game props, etc. Each year, $1 million in bets out there, which is basically, it's all my stuff. Like I'm doing most of the fills or what I sent out, my portion back, and that's a shitload of money. And like some people have asked me, like, what does it feel like having like $1 million on a game? Now, obviously, having been through this from when I started all the way up until wherever I am now in my journey in the sports betting thing, kind of get used to it. Now, excuse me, having like 7 figures on a game, I think it would be a lot more nerve-wracking if I was betting on like a side or a total. But having it spread out in props, it's a little bit different. You just don't have the same type of I don't think you're as nervous as you would be if you had the side or the total. Excuse me. Got a little tickle in the throat here. Got a little cold. I've had an Arctic freeze up here. But anyhow, I can remember back the first time I really decided to push things with my bankroll. And it might have been Justin Fields last year at Ohio State, maybe. And I can remember one week popped up about 8 to 10 weeks into the season. And I said to myself, all right, we're going for it. And I probably had an 80 to 100K bankroll or something at the time. And what I did was I decided I was going to push all in. Hold on a second. Got to try and get this tickle out of my throat. Obviously not ideal, but I think that's a little better. But anyhow, I had about 80 to 100K bankroll at this time. And I said, fuck it, I'm going for it this week. I know my edge. I know most weeks, if I'm putting in, let's just say I'm putting in 20 bets. The worst I was doing at the time was maybe like a 500 day, or, over a 20 bet slate at noon, or a 20 bet slate at 3, or a 20 bet slate at 7 o'clock. The worst I'm seeing is break even. And like I touched on before, I was hitting, in some of those years, I was hitting maybe 70% on some of these props. And my bankroll was growing pretty good. And I could still remember this. Sitting at my desk, and I'm like, I'm putting it all in. And when I say all in, there's maybe 20 plays, 4,000 a play. I don't know if, with that size of an edge, maybe it's not that irresponsible, but I just knew that the risk of ruin wasn't great. And ironically, I broke even for 4 weeks straight. And it was nerve-wracking having that amount of money in the game. But after you do something like that multiple times, when you're kind of all in, and again, you're not on one play, you're on 20 plays or whatever, 20 per slate or whatever it is. You just get used to it. It's like anything else. It's like, the first time you drink or the first time you do a drug. You're really nervous to do it, but then, maybe with experience, it just becomes like second nature to you, and the nerves just kind of go away. So that's kind of how it was. The nerves just go away, and then, maybe a couple of years later, or the next year, maybe, actually, so let me finish the story before I get to that. So, you got that amount of money in, and I broke even for about 4 weeks after that. And the reason why, and I think I wrote about this before, and this is going back to actually when Trenihill was on, Bet the Process, Matt Trenihill. Also, strong recommendation. Anything with Matt Trenihill, any of those podcasts, go listen to those. It'll maybe change your perspective or get you to start thinking in a different way about certain things. But, so I'm all in. I break even for 4 weeks. And the reason why was because, the prior 8 to 10 weeks or whatever it was, I just cleaned up. I won every week. And that was part of the reason why I decided, hey, now's a good time. But the problem was, now I'm betting on the shittier books. All the good books, I beat all the good books. And when I say good books, I mean soft books. So I take my bankroll from here, I run it up to wherever, and now I'm like, all right, let's keep doing this. And, I just got to a point where these 4 weeks, I'm betting on shittier books, and I'm not getting maybe the same prices or the same, derivatives or whatever. And then, eventually I broke through, and then that just became kind of second nature. Having a large portion of my bankroll in play constantly. And, then, the next thing you got 250K in on a game. The most nervous I've ever been was probably when I had $500,000, I think, in props on the Cincinnati Rams Super Bowl. And that's like, that's a big amount of money. And, But again, when you get a lot of unders and a lot of no's in a game, the chances of it going completely sideways, it's not great. I mean, you do have outliers like the Pats Philly Super Bowl, or maybe even the Atlanta Pats Super Bowl. That might be one. I wasn't betting them then, but the chances of things going sideways aren't great. And again, all these games as I'm building up to here, and all these slates when I'm putting a good portion of my bankroll in, it's just flipping over, and I'm just churning whatever, 10, 15, 20%, 10, 15, 20%, and then it just grows. And it's funny when Trenny Hale mentioned this last year on that podcast. I'm like, this is like describing my fucking gambling career to a T. This is exactly what happened to me, and it led to the culmination of the Philly. I think it was the Philly Chiefs Super Bowl. Now, I didn't plan like, oh, I'm going to put $1 million on this game. Had a great college season. And now you have this bankroll, and you have all these outs in front of you, and you have what you feel are soft props that you've been crushing every year, and now all of a sudden, you're just betting these edges all week. Boom, 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 boom. And that's one thing. If I feel like I have a pretty good edge, I'm just gonna spray the bullets at it. And the next thing you know, I looked at my portfolio and I'm like, holy fuck, you get a fucking $1 million on this game. And it's nerve-wracking. It's certainly nerve-wracking because you're always thinking in the back of your head, what if you get this 1% outcome and you get totally wrecked here? But the fact of the matter is, it's very hard if you have even 40 to 50 plays going on for all that to happen. Now, some bad things did happen in that game. We had that doink kick. That killed me right there. It didn't kill me, but, lost there. I think I crushed the player props there, and I lost some of the game props that I bet. And I broke about even. I might have lost like a very little amount, compared to, having $1 million risk. And then last year was like the biggest, I wouldn't say it was the biggest disaster, but it's just one of those things that can happen. I had a lot of under positions on this game. This is another thing I wrote about last year was losing $146K on the Super Bowl. Again, I had some pretty big positions, maybe even some irresponsible positions. I had 20 to 30,000 on a number of just straight player props in this game, and again, I feel like all those player props were, I think I priced them all pretty good. I think I got pretty good numbers. Everything was going great. And, if Shanahan calls that game a little differently in the fourth quarter, I clean up. Instead, goes to overtime. I go from, winning. I don't remember how much it was. It could have been 100, 150. I don't remember how much I was due to win. I wrote the whole thing out, but I think I wound up losing 150. It was like a 250K swing or something like that, because the game goes to overtime. And, when Trenny Hill, he said that on that podcast, it made me think like, maybe I'm overbetting this. Maybe I'm overbetting my bankroll a little bit. I don't know. Another thing, like, I don't calculate. I just kind of go by feel. I don't calculate like, I'm going to bet X percent this. I kind of just fire and go. And it's probably something that I need to work on a little bit, is how much money I'm putting on these no's relative to what I'm betting on straight player props. I don't know what the correct number is, but I know that I'm probably overbetting a lot of these no's when I'm laying 10 to 1 or 5 to 1 or whatever. And, if a bunch of those go the wrong way, it could get really ugly. But that's something that I'm very aware that I probably need to work on. And maybe this year I won't have as much exposure. Just have to see how the week unfolds. But, having that amount of money in on one game, it's a little nerve-wracking, but, again, I've seen this stuff many times before and had big amounts in at various stages. It's all kind of the same. First time you do it, it's kind of nerve-wracking, and then you just get used to it. So that's that. I think that pretty much wraps everything up here for today. Sorry about the coughing, but again, that's how it goes up here. Got a little bit of a cold. So anyhow, yeah, went 9-10 on that game, on the national title game this year. Went 7-1 giving out plays this year, which were free rolls, which I paid people out because I gave out like a 5K free roll. I got 2 more plays to give out. I'll probably give out 2 more for the Super Bowl props to people who fall into the criteria of what they needed to do to qualify for these. So 2 more there. And yeah, I look back, I went 16-7, which was the first slate that I gave out for that Michigan-Washington game last year. So all in all, 32-18, 64%. It's pretty good. Hopefully we have a better result next year, or a better result with this Super Bowl, which I'll probably do some type of blog on. So in the future for this podcast, I plan on eventually maybe bring on some guests. And I also am going to probably do a lot of different educational type stuff, like just on networking, how to deal with bookies, just all kinds of stuff like that. Security. I did a pretty big networking post last year that was probably, wasn't the most viewed post that I had, but it was definitely I got the most positive feedback on it. People thought it was an excellent post, and I think I could take that and move it into, a long form conversation where, I could just turn it into a podcast. And I'll try and structure it a lot better than how I'm doing this. Just have clear notes and how I'm going to attack it. So, yeah, that's it. I'll probably be back next week. Have a good week.